when he's in the French Alps. He's talking about the tetrahedron rotating in the crystal blue sky, or whatever poeticism he uses.
Back when skies were blue.
Skies were blue.
If you're a Greer fan, you get that one. Hello, you are listening to The Secret Knowledge. This is our first episode covering a new series on Gaia about Dr. Steven Greer. It's called Disclosure. My name is Shane.
My name is Allison.
And this will be a somewhat informal conversation. We will have probably up at this point a more analytical episode about Dr. Steven Greer. But this is just going to be our reactions to the first episode, titled Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind Origins. A bit of a Dr. Greer origin story. So I won't be introducing him because this video acts as an introduction to him. What are your impressions right off the bat?
Well, I think that statement is a good guide for listening to this video, which is, and I'm hard pressed to promote getting a Gaia subscription in order to watch this, so I have mixed feelings about saying that. So I suppose I'm really speaking to people that perhaps already have a Gaia subscription, but this will make a little bit more sense if you've already seen the video itself. But if not, and if you don't want to buy a Gaia subscription, then we'll just kind of give you a rundown of what happens in the episodes so you can save your cash.
And Steven Greer is someone who you may be familiar with through, I think his movies were on Netflix.
They've also been on Amazon Prime.
I think he has 4 main films: Sirius, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, Unacknowledged, and A Cosmic Hoax, which is available on YouTube.
So this is just adding to his oeuvre. And I think going into watching this, a couple of things. One, this is my first exposure to Gaia. I suppose we call it a streaming service or a network. And I have not gotten a subscription before, despite sometimes occasionally having my interest piqued on documentaries or programs I see advertised. But I think going into it, my questions, like before watching it, my questions are, what is the purpose of this new Greer content?
Right.
And where are we going with a 10-part series specifically on Greer? So what were your impressions of that?
Well, I kind of wondered how much of this was going to be a biographical take on Greer's life and how much of it was going to be him just sort of talking about aliens. And lucky, we got a little bit of both.
Yes.
To start off, like, I did want to know a little bit more about his life. Maybe that will be covered in future episodes.
What do you want to know?
I just feel, I guess I'll just jump into some of the things I have written down. The episode starts off with Greer talking about a near-death experience he had when he was 17.
Which, is this new to us? Have we heard about the near-death experience before? It feels a little familiar.
I had heard him mention it. I don't know. I think he goes into detail in it in Close Encounters.
Okay, because I don't remember what the near-death experience is, and I'm surprised.
He got very sick.
But with what?
I don't know. He's not going to say.
Okay.
So
he had a fever?
I think he did.
He had a fever.
He had a really bad fever. He was sweating. And he got really sick and nearly died. And during this experience, he encountered not 2 extraterrestrials, but 2 strong points of consciousness who he had a bit of a conversation
in
with.
his near-death experience.
Yes.
Which we don't know if this happens at a hospital. We don't know if this happens in his bedroom.
Right.
I'm just saying we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. He also skips over. The reason I've kind of jumped into this experience when he's 17 so quickly is because later in the movie, or later in the episode, he mentioned seeing a UFO when he was 8. And I'll get to that in a second.
Which we've definitely heard about that before.
Yeah. So he interacts with these 2 points of consciousness. And they kind of say, you can go back to Earth, or I don't think he was given an option.
Or you just go into, I mean, it's like you go into the light, like that kind of classic scenario. Like, do you want to die? Do you want to be the one consciousness now? Or do you want to like...
Yeah, which to Steven Greer's credit, actually the second thing I wrote down is that I've had a similar potentially near-death experience when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I might have been 6. I'll talk about that later though, but I will say for many things Greer said in this video that were a bit difficult for me to follow, this was actually one that stood out to me because I've had a similar near-death experience.
All right, you and Greer, you're cut from the same cloth.
But the biographical information gets a little sparse after that, and so as my first impression, I wanted there to be more biographical stuff because, as I think you wrote down, within 4 minutes, Greer is already kind of not like promoting CE5, but we're already talking about CE5 protocols.
Which I had a pretty big gut reaction to, because I think one question we had already asked before downloading our Gaia membership was, is this 10-part series actually going to be a 10-part long CE5 commercial? And I will somewhat withhold judgment for that simply because part 1 is titled CE5 Origins. So I will grant that perhaps people not familiar with the Greer content in the episode labeled Origins, I would expect to visit the CE5 protocols and background and how it got started, etc. So I'm going to semi-withhold any commentary as to whether I think this is a commercial, although we decided to watch the trailer after, we didn't watch it before the first episode, and the trailer makes me not want to withhold that judgment, but I'm going to try.
So what was your reaction to the trailer? Do you feel like this is going to be a series that's just a long commercial?
Well, okay, so the trailer's pretty short. It's just over a minute long. There's a lot of flashing images, as you'd expect in a trailer. And it starts off with a woman being able to take a picture of like an entity of some kind. The statement that you too can make contact refers to the protocols as being the Rosetta Stone of contact. The fact that the government is not happy that people are making contact without its permission, mentions the CE5 protocols, and the fact that other alien information out there, not Greer, maybe information regarding the military, is actually false disclosure, not the real disclosure project of Steven Greer. So the trailer does all seem to tie back to CE5. It doesn't seem to suggest that this is a biography or an investigation into Greer's life, like as not the primary purpose is what I'm saying. Like obviously we're getting some biography. Obviously we're getting some of the disclosure files, the archives. If we're viewing the trailer as an indication as to what the content of the 10-part series is going to be, everything about the trailer seems to tie back to CE5 and the fact that here are these protocols and you can do it too. So that's, I suppose, what we should expect.
Yeah, that was sort of, I won't call it a worry because I had a similar reaction when I was watching this, which is that I wanted to withhold judgment. I don't know what will be uploaded on this channel by the time this video is up, but I've been pretty critical of Greer and some other things that we've uploaded, and I really wanted to watch this episode with an open mind. So I had previously sort of gone through the biography we get at the start of the episode, which is near-death experience at 17, contact with 2 forms of consciousness, and then something happens a few months later, which does end up being the origins of the CE5 protocols. And this is already where, like, unfortunately, I did have to be skeptical of Greer. Do you remember how he said CE5 was first made?
This did not stick out to me, so I think you should take this away.
So when Steven Greer was 17 years old, he was meditating on a mountain, and he was able to, through intense meditation, call an ET to planet Earth. He then interacted with the ET, and he claims to have invented...
Is this the one that touched him on the shoulder? This is the same... E.T.?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the one that touched him on the shoulder. And he then transcended into their craft, which one of the main things you'll hear Greer say is that actual ET crafts are not built and constructed in the same way that we might think. They're made of consciousness and also certain fiber optic technology.
So they're both interdimensional, but also in the material reality we're in. Okay.
Which is another theme of the episode. There's a lot of, and again, I don't want to be mean right off the bat, but like there's a lot of buzzwords like 5D, 6D technology, fiber optic, this and this, skunk work, ETV, ARV. Like Greer throws a lot at us. But as far as this first experience, he goes up into the craft with the other ET. And the Greer ego is on display right from the get-go because the aliens start to ask him, how did you manage to do this? And Greer's like, I meditated so hard and I'm so good with consciousness that I was able to get up here.
Okay. So he explains this to the aliens.
He tells that he claims the aliens
that are already communicating with each other through their own,
And with these aliens, he says he developed the first CE5 protocols, which involve focusing your consciousness to a point and communicating to aliens where you are. And the thing that stood out to me with this, that I was hoping Greer would not do, but he did within 5 minutes of the movie, is it's kind of already about Steve. Like, it's...
Whoa. We have, I mean, not to jump ahead too far, but when he's asked the question... by what's his name, Billy Carson, are you agenda driven? Which he doesn't even say. Something that bothers me about that question is like the agenda is used as an abstraction, like it's not defined as to what the agenda would be. But okay, whatever. Greer says, and I quote, "I don't like self-referencing."
Which is definitely interesting because the common theme in all the Greer stories are like, it was me,
right?
You know, I was the big guy on campus. Anyway, I took note of what Greer said to the aliens, or about the aliens, which was, I quote, I taught them. So this advanced form of consciousness, Greer communicated to the aliens. If there's one thing I could say that really rubbed me the wrong way about the CE5 protocols is that to me, throughout the course of this episode, Greer comes off as like an old school, I'm talking like 1500s priest, because one of his main points is that if you are pure of heart and your intentions are totally not selfish at all, then the aliens will come. To me, that kind of reminds me of like old Christianity.
Oh man, yeah. I wrote something down very similar in my notes.
What'd you write?
Okay, so in regard to whether or not you can make contact with aliens, he at one point, I believe he says, like, are you pure enough of heart to make contact, which is to say, do you believe enough? And to me that felt really similar to the rhetoric I was taught in my Pentecostal background when my Sunday school teachers and Jesus camp leaders were coaching me as how to make contact with the Holy Spirit. And you know, there's the famous Bible verse about the faith of a mustard seed, but a lot of the focus is like, are you believing hard enough? Like, do you have the faith? Because if you don't have the faith, then you're not going to be able to speak in tongues because you're not going to have, you're not going to be allowed that sign of salvation, essentially. And let me tell you what, like as a little girl, I was hardcore after that sign of salvation because I wanted something tangible that I could look to tell me that I wasn't going to go to hell. So I agree that I find it disturbing that we're asking, like, in order for us to make contact with the aliens, the barrier to entry is like, are you believing hard enough?
Right. And this also goes into a common theme, which I thought I wasn't going to get into in this first episode. I really wanted to try to look at Greer with my previous opinions of him set aside. But something he consistently does is not just talk about aliens and consciousness, but he's also building up the personality of Greer. So to go off of what you just said, if you have to be so pure of heart and you have to be so whatever to contact aliens, and Greer can do it whenever he wants, what does that tell the viewer about Greer?
Yes.
He's like a messiah.
Yes.
And
he references the Maharishi in learning meditation. But that also puts us in like a very strange space where it says, in order to get the proof of belief, you have to already believe hard enough to get the proof, which is a very circular, like, in order for God to show himself to you, you must believe in God to show the miracles. In order to see the miracles, you must believe in God hard enough. Like, if this is supposed to be part of the proof involved with the Disclosure Project, and if we are to believe that anyone can do, how can it both be anyone can do this, but also you have to believe hard enough?
I'm kind of the opinion that Steven Greer throws in that everyone can do this stuff to make it seem like he's not being as like contrived as he is. But that's a pretty good segue into another biographical detail about Greer is, what was it? The Maharishi International University meditation school?
Yeah.
While Greer was involved in that, there was one, I think, weekend he was out in the mountains meditating, and he was already so tapped in so quickly and so efficiently that he thought, okay, I'm going to try to call those aliens again. And he did, in his words, successfully call the aliens, and he claims that a bunch of people saw them. Do you remember what else he said about that?
This is when he's in the French Alps. He's talking about the tetrahedron rotating in the crystal blue sky, or whatever poeticism he uses.
Back when skies were blue.
Skies were blue.
If you're a Greer fan, you get that one.
But why in none of the documentaries, because we're not new to his content, why haven't we ever gotten to hear from any of these people in the French Alps that were with him that saw the tetrahedron? Like, why am I only hearing from Greer? If there's so many people around this event, why are we only hearing from Greer?
Well, I'll tell you why in Greer's words.
Okay.
Greer has two reasons why you've never heard about this event before. The first, okay, I'm going to say something else, and then I'm going to get into why. One thing you need to understand about Greer is that anything you've ever heard about aliens from the news, movies, anything, any UFO mythology, it's not real. And basically, if you want to believe anything about aliens, it has to come from Greer himself, which becomes complicated.
That's why everything else is false disclosure.
Everything else is false, which becomes complicated when you look at people like Richard Doty's inclusions in Greer's movies. That's a conversation for another time. But so that's reason number one, is Greer says UFO events don't happen like you think they do. They happen how I say they do. And when they happen for real, people are so in awe of this beautiful event that there's no need to run to the news or call the authorities. It's so beautiful. The other reason he gives why this moment was so fleeting is that the aliens were able to sense the consciousnesses of the people involved. And as he says, they, quote, backed off. Because as soon as an alien sniffs that something sus is going on, they're going to be out of there. So those are the two reasons why you've never heard of this huge sighting that happened in this mountain range. It's because of those two reasons.
All right. Well, I understand now, and thank you. Another, and maybe this is something you can also shed some light on, since you were able to so eloquently disperse my skepticism on that topic. Why have we never heard from the roommate that sensed and saw the extraterrestrial being that wasn't materially present in Steven Greer's room after he was meditating before bed, but sensed the energy and knew the UFO was outside the window? I find that strange, because I feel like we could have heard from the roommate in any of the numerous documentaries. And before anyone says that the roommate doesn't want to talk, I would just want to reference the story of Travis. I wish I remembered his last name right off the top of my head, but I don't. But he was the logger that is one of the most famous abduction stories. And he has a whole host of other loggers that were with him that saw, allegedly the UFO that abducted him for a period of days. So examples do exist of people that were with the person that made the point of contact that can also say, I was there, I saw the thing. So I don't know why we can't hear from the roommate.
Sometimes Greer's logic about things reminds me of when I was a kid and I would get into an imaginary fight with a friend. And, it would start off with like, well, I'm as strong as Luke Skywalker. And then my friend would say, well, I'm as strong as Goku. And then I would say, well, I have a sword that can slice anything. And then my friend would say, well, I have a shield that can block anything. And that's how I always end up feeling when Greer talks about stuff, because like there's never any room for skepticism, because if so, oh, you're not pure of heart, or like, well, my roommate, blah, blah, blah. Like Greer's proof though of that day is that he has audio from an airport that claimed to have seen the blue craft that he called to his house. I would be curious to dig into that. I mean, I'm not gonna like.
Yeah, let's do. Maybe that's on his YouTube channel. Maybe it's on his website. His perfect.
Maybe it's on his great
pristine website. Yeah.
But to anyone listening to this who might be ready to like defend Greer in the comments, I'm not gonna refute that. That audio was played in the episode.
If you can find that audio and link it to us in the comments, I absolutely want that, because there's just so much information in all of these documentaries, not just Greer's, but in general. We're on the hunt to track the sources down. Yeah. So anything you have access to, we will gladly address it if you're able to find it and bring it to the forefront.
Yeah, and like if I think though the kind of weird part about Greer's story is he claims that people came from all over the county to his house, sheriffs, officers of various kinds, cars, and in another documentary, he actually told the story a little bit differently in this one. In another documentary, his roommate comes into the room and says, "What did you do?" Almost as like Greer does this often. Whereas in this version of the story, the roommate still says, "What did you do?" But the delivery was much different. Speaking of the ET in Greer's room, he claims it was not fully materialized, but you could sense its presence.
Its energy. There's a lot of we love a vibe in this crowd.
I love a good vibe. But I think in episode 1 of a series, like Greer does specifically mention the Gaia crowd, which he says will be more adept at this than normal people than contacting aliens. But
which feels like pandering.
I think it's some pandering.
It's some serious pandering.
But my worry about Greer is that like so many things were thrown at me already in episode 1 that I'm not even sure what the hell he's talking about. He claimed literally offhandedly, this was something he brushed aside to get to something else, that there are non-classified projects about trans-dimensional 5 and 6D travel. That's a throwaway line in this episode. He never goes back to that.
And I think that kind of comes back to what I was initially saying as to what is the purpose of this 10-part series. It's clearly not to give us the proof of aliens. Otherwise, I mean, even more so than his other films and projects, because there's no contextualization with evidence. Like, there's not even an effort to give evidence.
Yeah.
I guess except for the alleged CE5 pictures and videos.
One quote I wanted to circle back around to from my notes is, I'm not saying Steve steps into a lie.
Steve.
He does call himself Steve when he talks to the aliens.
Oh, that's right. Hello, my name is Steve.
He says, hello, my name is Steve. Something I just thought was interesting. I'm not trying to nitpick him. I'm not trying to catch him in a lie. But he describes the ET who touched him on the shoulder that day as having almond eyes, which is sort of a common trait you'll see aliens have, the big green head and the sort of almond-shaped elongated eyes.
He thought it was a deer standing on 2 legs.
He thought it was a deer standing on its legs. He also, though, then says later in the episode that ETs are not like any caricature you've ever seen. So But which one is it? Because you've just given me a physical trait, often, if not the most popular physical trait of aliens, is elongated, almond-shaped eyes. I can't think of a more...
That feels pretty classic. Although sometimes they're small.
Sometimes they're small.
Sometimes they're big.
Sometimes they're big.
Okay, so one thing I definitely need to address, and I only did a small Google on Billy Carson when you were out of the room earlier, so I don't know a whole lot about our host.
I like him, I gotta say. I like that he's there.
Great. Welcome, Billy. Welcome to the Greer Project. So I don't know a lot about him other than he's an entrepreneur. He went to MIT, went to Harvard, but I don't think his background necessarily matters for what I'm about to say. I think we need to always analyze in media the format that information is given. And what I mean by that is, what is the vibe that we get from the place and setting of this? Because it could have this 10-part series could have been arranged in a number of ways. Yeah. It is different than his documentaries. Where are we? We're in something that looks like a studio. It looks like a news studio. Billy is meant to look like a news anchor. What do news anchors do? They're journalists. They're asking questions. If they're asking questions as journalists, they're trying to uphold themselves to a certain level of journalistic integrity, which means there should be some level of investigation or questioning of the material that we're given. If this had been the second time that I had watched this first part, I would have been counting all of the wows that Billy Carson was doing, especially at the beginning of this. There were a lot of wows. There was a lot of mm-hms. There was a lot of repeating the last phrase in a sentence that Greer had used to ask the question back to him. We're very much in a news situation, kind of like a Barbara Walters interview, where it's one-on-one. The room is kind of dark. It's not a news interview like a news program where multiple people are arguing amongst themselves. But it's meant to be a one-on-one question-answer sort of session. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I will say I like that format for this, even though Greer still finds plenty of opportunities to kind of go off into Greer land. I liked having Billy as a part of it. Like, it just seemed to kind of ground things. And for me personally, I need Greer to be grounded.
But why isn't Billy asking, where's your roommate? Why hasn't your roommate come forward? Where are these people? There's no... He's only there as what you're saying, as a sounding board for Greer. He has no purpose other than to be a vehicle for which Greer, who can talk perfectly fine on his own without anyone asking him questions. So I don't really understand why Billy is there other than exactly what you're saying, to give us a sense that something is happening that isn't actually happening. I mean, even Barbara Walters, the news grandma of our century, sometimes would ask a difficult question to the person, and maybe in future episodes there will be some questioning, but right now the questions only are, give us more information. Can you tell us a little more about that? There's nothing but surface level.
Right. No, I think that's an excellent point, and there's actually a couple things I want to say about that. One, that is sort of the role that narrators in the past have played in Greer's movies, especially in his movie Sirius. I had a huge problem with the narrator in that movie, or in that documentary, because it's like a narrator with an attitude. And like, before Greer has even proven himself to the viewer, the narrator, through just tonally alone, is leading me to think that Greer is some type of hero. I'll point out the first 10 seconds of this episode are footage from the opening of Sirius, where Greer walks out onto a stage and is waving to people. So I think you are absolutely right that Billy's basically there to blow smoke up Greer's ass.
He's there to say wow. He's there to say He's there to get us to... wherever Greer wants to go next. I don't even know that I'm convinced that Billy wrote. I don't think Billy wrote these questions. I'm not even convinced that little bit where Greer corrected him isn't just a way for Greer to talk to seem more credible in that instance. Maybe not.
No,
maybe that's too far.
I think you're totally right. And I think another thing to point out here is, like you kind of said, Greer is never questioned. He's just kind of enabled. And look at where we're watching this. We're watching this on Gaia, which is a place like, look, I read the comments on this, okay? And I think it takes a special type of person these days on the internet to actually leave a comment. So I'm never going to imply that comments are indicative of audience. I just don't really think that can be the case. But there are 40 comments on this first episode. One of the comments is someone saying they hope aliens come and take their children away from the evil world. They don't mind if the aliens don't take them as long as their kids can escape. People are thanking Dr. Greer. People are telling him that they've noticed all these things since watching his video. Like, this airing on Gaia, I think that the following episodes are going to be more of this.
Right.
Like, I think it's going to be like, this is Greer's audience. He even compliments the audience himself. Like, which is why
the focus of this project, as opposed to at least the artifice of some of the other projects, is not in the proof of the existence of aliens. Right. There's already the presumption that the audience is on board with the aliens being present in there. And something that disturbs me about this content already tailored for an audience that's going to agree with the material is, I don't know what makes that different than Fox News. I don't know what makes Billy different than a Fox News anchor, because if it's only to affirm the person in the beliefs that they're trying to present, then I don't need you to be there. I don't want you there. It's only there to fool me, and I think it's dirty.
Yeah, well, I'll go one step more there, which was one of the final points I wanted to bring up. Okay, this is going to be a big one, so I'm going to have to make sure I can do it. If Greer is saying, you have to be pure of heart to do this, and I can do this, he's saying, I'm pure of heart, right? If he's complimenting the Gaia audience, and they have worked out in their minds that they can contact aliens, what do they also think of themselves? I'm pure of heart. My intentions are perfect. I'm doing this beautiful thing. The government doesn't want me to do it. My friends don't want me to do it. My family thinks I'm crazy. Like, you just pointed out how this relationship can be unhealthy, a la Fox News. I think a similar thing is happening where he's like enabling these people to sort of live this like delusion now.
Yes.
I think you need to look no further than the comments to see that on full display. No, I think that's an excellent point. I think that's like exactly what's going on. And last point, Greer's newest film, A Cosmic Hoax, more than any of his previous films, has leaned into a political angle, at least in its rhetoric. It's not really political in the sense that it's any more anti-government than any of his other stuff has been, but its rhetoric seems a little bit more biting, like a Fox News story.
And what do people love? Outrage,
and they love having an enemy. And I think a lot of times people point out how major news outlets, let's say you're on a more like liberal thing, it's going to be making fun of a conservative person. I think more so than making enemies out of the other person, they kind of secretly make an identity in the person watching, where through having an enemy, you build up yourself a certain way. And I think that's what Greer is doing, is like, you're like me, you're pure of heart, like the Gaia audience, like you can do it too.
And I think that's why, even though I love kooky documentaries and I love this material and I want to believe, like I love aliens, like I'm looking for the proof.
I hate the government too. Fuck the government. Like
all of that is true about you and I, and why we even want to embark on this project. But I've never really felt a strong draw to pay for a Gaia membership, because I honestly just felt like I would be fed this type of non-substance material, and I want the best information out there, which means I want the counter arguments. I don't want something to just reaffirm this feel good fun belief system.
Yeah, and if you are interested in hearing a more critical take on Greer, I'll direct you toward another series of videos we'll be making about his movie Unacknowledged. But I'd say my my kind of last thing that I would want to bring up, and if you have many more notes, I'll go through any of them with you. But my last thing is actually something that thus far, I'm not saying Greer didn't have kind of crazy shit to say about aliens, but he went into this like ancient aliens direction that actually like really irritated
Billy
me.
Carson is specifically educated on ancient history or ancient origins, just for the record.
Oh,
so
really?
yeah, so
Well, maybe Billy can give me a source for this then. But I kind of had a big problem when Steven Greer said people have been doing this for forever. We just recently learned that in drumming or chanting circles, people were contacting aliens. Okay. 2 issues with this. One, there's just no even attempt at a source at all. They don't even put anything visual on the screen. They don't show us what culture he might be talking about. They give us nothing there. So that's my first issue. My second issue is it's fucking typical white people bullshit to look at an ancient culture, not understand it, and say it's aliens. Like, maybe they were using drum circles as a spiritual thing or as a religious thing. I'm sure they were. I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to say, but like, I just have a big problem when like people do this, because one, there is so much we don't understand about ancient civilizations just through documentation alone. Like, not everything was documented. We might see a picture of something on a wall that we've deduced as maybe a religious figure of some kind, but like, a lot is conjecture, a lot is years of studying and like research. I don't think you can just say in episode 1, yeah, drumming circles, that was alien contact. Like, people been doing this forever. Like,
also, doesn't that seem to contradict the fact that you need Greer's special protocols, that you have to be pure of heart and you have to do that visualization thing where you imagine the earth and then your country and then the city that you grew up in and then the mountain that you're on? Like, if I can just go outside and have a good time and get my vibe on and the aliens will come to my energy, I don't think we need Greer.
Well, that's a good point about like the kind of implications of that, because this is actually maybe my last thought. Is this episode made me realize Greer is much more of kind of like a shitty hippie than I thought he was before. Like, so much of his stuff comes on to this kind of pseudo spirituality thing, and like, what do shitty hippies love to do? They love to justify things they believe as like, well, people have done this for thousands of years. Like, those old drum circles, bro, like those were contacting aliens. Like, I'm just doing that. Like, no, you're not. Like, fuck off. Honestly, I didn't mean to just say fuck off to Greer in the first episode of this, but I gotta stand up for my buddy Alex, who just called us during the recording of this. Coke would love my anthropological defense here, but anyway, how many UFOs out of 5 do you rate this first episode of this series?
Well, you know, I still got to give it 5 UFOs because I'm on this ride. I'm excited to see where it goes. I've already bought the membership, so let's just hang out and see what else Greer has in store for us. I think the question that I'm going to continue to take into the second episode is, what is the purpose of this? What are we meant to get out of it as a viewer?
I think it's also a 5-bagger for me. I'm gonna give it 5 UFOs out of 5. I will say what I'm kind of worried about moving forward. I am legitimately interested in more of a biography from Greer, and I will say I hope we get that. Like, even though he drives me crazy, I want to learn more about him. I want to maybe be able to piece together some biographical things about him, and I hope the series goes that way. My worry is that it's gonna get pretty nutty with CE5 stuff and buzzwords.
My worry is that it's gonna get pretty boring with CE5 and buzzwords, because I can only hear about the protocol and how anyone can do it, but we need Greer's special way so many times before snoozing. And I already felt a little snoozy here because I've already heard it in all of his documentaries before. So if this is meant for the audience that is already pro Greer and into the stuff, that's why I want more biography. I just want something new. I've already watched hours of Greer content.
Yeah, I was getting pretty glassy-eyed near the end there. I was just kind of like, oh my god. Anyway, I guess those are our final thoughts on this.
That's my final thought. I think that's a wrap for me.
And if you liked listening to this, or if you hated listening to this and you're ready to respond, leave a comment below, give us a like or dislike, and feel free to check out other videos on our channel.
Yeah, hit the notification bell so you can see what else we come up next. I gotta say that I really enjoyed the reference to co-creating in this episode, and I know Abraham Hicks isn't maybe on the first round of videos that we're going to do, but I can't wait to get there.
And stay tuned for our next episode to get the next piece of secret knowledge. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.